And I'm Anna Dowahair.
And this is the Reclaiming the Garden podcast. Before we get into the details of our conversation today with Artie Peters, we did want to mention something. The other day, I was looking at our little page on Apple Podcasts, and I saw that some asshole gave us 1 star. And, I just think of, we're obviously very, small podcast,
Yeah.
This person has to be searching for things for progressive Christian, queer Christian, deconstruction podcasts to give a bad rating to. It's just, it would be weird for someone to just
and I think it's almost worse that they didn't actually give a review. They just rated it 1 star and peaced out. Because at least then we'd know why. We'd be like, oh, this person's just a troll or whatever.
I've heard I remember. Part of the reason why the podcast collective Irreverent Media started is because I remember watching their launch. If folks listening don't know what it is, it's a podcast collective with a lot of cool deconstruction folks. The Ex-Evangelical podcast, Kevin Garcia, Sarah Heath. So, they mentioned that, they get a lot of bad ratings on Apple Podcasts because, they're, a lot more well-known, and so a lot of conservative Christians might be going after them, trying to bring their ratings down, which does, bring you down in the podcast algorithm page, whatever. Mm-hmm. So, it's just a thing we gotta fight. So that means, guys, it really does help us if you rate and add reviews on Apple Podcasts. So
yes, we are at 3 5-star reviews now, at the very least. So hopefully it balances out. That'd be really cool.
Yeah. Anyway, so let's get into today's episode. So we had a wonderful conversation with Artie Peters, a dear friend of both of ours that we met at the Q Christian Fellowship Conference this year. We had this really interesting conversation about rituals, media, and culture, particularly the intersection of all of those. And they're going to be doing some really interesting research in their graduate degree related to rituals and gender. So we're really excited about that. Anything else you have to say before we get into the interview?
I'm actually really excited for this episode because I feel like it was an episode that was different, I think, than either of us were expecting. Because usually we talk about people, we talk about their faith journeys and how they came out and stuff. But I thought it was really cool that we got to talk about the impact of media and evangelicalism. And I thought that was really cool because I feel like Christian media is so weird, and we get into this
yes, all
quite a bit.
Cringy shit. That's great.
Yes, so we get into it. I'm very, very excited for this episode, and hopefully at some point we can have Artie back on the podcast so they can discuss what they've learned with us in their first semester of grad school.
Well, let's get into it.
Alrighty, so today we're going to be interviewing our friend Artie Peters. So Artie, pronouns they, he, is a soon-to-be master's student at University College Dublin studying gender, sexuality, and culture. They work for Transvisible Montana and spent the last year being a youth group director with UCC. They love to listen to audiobooks, play with his cat, perform drag, and live in awe of their community. And Artie and I met at Q Christian Fellowship Conference online in 2021, and we have been great friends ever since, and we are so excited to have them on the podcast. So welcome, Artie. We're so excited to have you.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here. I think my greatest accomplishment of our friendship is the fact that I was the first person who you ever baked anything from scratch with.
Whoa.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it happened where, it's funny, but it's not, but it's funny now. We both
It's funny now.
We ended up single at, basically within a week of each other, and we were like, Palentine's Day, and so we ended up baking over Zoom.
Nice.
And now I own flour and sugar, and I own all, I'm gonna try and make lemon bars this weekend, and all I had to buy were lemons. I was very happy.
Proud of you. You went from not owning flour or sugar in your home to having both.
Yes, and in abundance. So I guess we will start off with a nice, easy, light question. Describe your faith journey, where you came from, where you started, how it's going. We're curious to know, and then whatever rabbit holes you want to go down, we're happy to follow you.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in Missoula, Montana, so about a population of about 100,000 people. And I grew up in a church called CLC, Christian Life Center, going to church every week. Watched a lot of VeggieTales in the youth room. Still really like VeggieTales.
Honestly, yeah, they're still fun. And actually, the guy who made I don't know about his stance on LGBTQ stuff, but he's not too bad from what I can see on Twitter. So, yeah.
Yeah. And then when I was about 14, I realized that there was something in the church that wasn't sitting right with me, but at the time I did not have the verbiage or understanding as to what it was. And I told my mom that I did not want to be religious anymore. I didn't want to be a Christian, and I got slapped as a response, and that kind of clarified my position of being like, okay, this is not where I want to be right now. And so I left aggressively, and I didn't do anything religious or related to that until I was about 22. And then I fell into a podcast rabbit hole of a podcast called Harry Potter and the Sacred Text, because I was a big fan of Harry Potter, and I started to learn about the ways that ritual can be reclaimed and changed for those of us who relate to different texts or needed a more user-friendly way of relating to the divine.
Yeah, wait, could you, I kind of know about the podcast, but could you go a little bit more into, like, what it is and what they do?
Yeah. So I admittedly have not listened to the new season because J.K. Rowling has gone off a deep end. I have plans to listen to it eventually, but and I know that is something that they admitted in the first season. They started this in 2018, which was when I started listening, and at that point in time, they were like, we are going to separate the author. We're just going to be like J.K. Rowling, who? Because it was also the time that Cursed Child was coming out, and so they were like, we don't want to deal with that. We're dealing with the 7 canon books, and that's what we're dealing with. But it's run by 2 podcasters, Vanessa Zoltan and Casper ter Kuile, although I believe Casper has gone on to different endeavors for the second season. And in the podcast, what they do is they go chapter by chapter. They give a 30-second recap of the chapter, and then they go through the chapter with a theme. So this theme might be love, it might be joy, it might be grief, and they go through where they see that theme in the chapter. And then they use a religious practice, such as Lectio Divina, which is a 4-step reading practice where you ask specific questions to try and get closer to the deeper meaning of the text. Or they use Pardes, which is a similar Jewish reading practice. They have thus far stuck to mostly Anglo-centric practices, given that Anglo-centric religions have pretty set texts that can, and pretty set ways of interacting with those texts. And also because they are both people who are white, they did not feel comfortable trying to breach the line of appropriation versus appreciation of using different religious backgrounds that they had not grown up in. But yeah, it gave me a really good opportunity to see that the things that I got out of religion, like love and joy and figuring out how to deal with grief, did not have to be attached to concepts such as love the sinner, hate the sin, which I had such a hard time justifying. And so that was my first baby step back into anything somewhat spiritual. And then a good friend of mine started an interfaith group here in Missoula called Kaleidoscope, specifically for queer people. And I started going to that and started getting more into ritual and deep faith discussions. And then when the pandemic hit, they were looking for more people to work on helping run Kaleidoscope. So I became someone who ran Kaleidoscope. And then I went to a spiritual retreat with the Harry Potter and Sacred Text group. I did a week of writing and reading and working on blessings, which I really struggle with. And then I, through that, found the queer Christian fellowship group and ended up becoming a youth director shortly after, and got to the point where this last January I was in a crisis of, should I go to do my master's or should I go to do divinity school, and chose to pursue my master's for right now. But definitely was not talking to someone earlier today about how, after I've done my master's, I might reapply for divinity school.
Yeah, but I mean, your master's program sounds really cool, though. Like, I guess studying, like, gender and sexuality.
Yeah, I have my bachelor's of arts in gender, sexuality, and women's studies, and then I have a second bachelor of arts in communication studies, so I have those two right now. And I plan on doing my research in master's. What I proposed is there's a pretty widely known / accepted concept from Judith Butler that gender is a performance. It's something that we perform for other people. And that is what I did my undergrad research on. And I want to rephrase it as gender as a ritual. Because for me, I think the concept of ritual can span everything from things that are extremely purposeful, things that we put a lot of time and thought and energy into, such as like maybe a bar mitzvah. That is a ritual that we put a ton of thought behind, to something as simple as brushing our teeth. That's a ritual we do every day. And I think gender can fit both of those. I think it can be something that we think a lot about, or something that we do without thinking, that is a habit that's been kind of encouraged by society. And so I am interested to see how we can phrase gender as a ritual, and then through that, what are the ways that we can take rituals that have been characteristically used to demonize queer people and use those and reclaim them. So such as, would it be possible to, while respecting and appreciating the concept of a bar mitzvah, have a gender-affirming bar mitzvah for children of youth who know that they are not the gender that they were assigned against their will by a doctor at birth? Or how can we use these different things like baptisms to be the concept of, there's a lot of controversy over whether or not you can be baptized more than once, but can someone who changes their name and gender, how can we support them if they want to go through being rebaptized as a way of appreciating that their identity in Christ has changed?
Yeah, I also know...
that's what I'm hoping to study. So I don't know enough about it yet to be...
it seems really cool. And I just, when you were talking about that, I thought about how, I know that some churches have, like, naming ceremonies, or, like, something of that nature. Yeah, which is really cool.
Yeah, a lot of families will have, like, naming ceremonies. There's also a lot of, like, cultural background to just the way that we engage in our texts are culturally rooted in things that we've believed, and so there are ways that we can use non related to identity affirming in Christ and how we interpret the teachings that we are engaging with, that can also be used to affirm anyone of any identity. So hoping that I can find ways to in my head, I see a master document of, like, rituals that range from, like, daily little rituals that could be something like tarot card reading that isn't traditionally necessarily linked to Christianity, but could be a way that you find yourself closer to Christ, to something as large as a baptism ceremony. You know, some things that span rituals that could be daily affirmations that help us feel more secure in our identity within ourselves and within Christ, to things that are huge, big life steps. So
what rituals are important to you in your life?
You think I'm stable enough to have consistent rituals.
I mean, I don't know, it doesn't have to be like a daily thing. It could just, you know.
Yeah, for me, I definitely take a lot of my faith journey from reading. It took me until I was 22 to realize that, oh, shoot, the whole point is to teach us how to love more and love each other.
Yeah.
What? I just had grown up in a space where that did not get put across to me. I did not understand as a child that my faith was supposed to be teaching me about these big things like love and grief and how to care for my neighbors. And instead, I thought my faith was supposed to be a do's and don'ts 10 commandments list. And I found a lot of solace in that time and still today in reading books, because that was what helped me imagine different ways to care for people around me and learn how to do those big things that faith is there for us when we need it to be. And so for me, I personally like listening to audiobooks because I cannot sit still worth a damn. And so I like to listen to audiobooks. Just in July, I listened to 60 hours of audiobooks.
Wow.
So yeah, cumulatively, I started listening to audiobooks in 2018. I've listened to 21 days of audiobooks.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so that's a big part of ritual and like helping me engage with the world around me and helping me learn. So that's definitely one of my top ones. I also do a daily tarot card reading.
Cool.
And so that's part of my ritual. But currently I have been very bad with most of my rituals because I am moving 4,000 miles away from home in 9 days. And so anything that is not, oh my goodness, I am moving to Ireland, what the heck am I doing with myself, has fallen off of the radar for about the last month.
Yeah, absolutely understandable.
Wow. You know, what you said about, like, you know, reading being one of your spiritual practices, I definitely resonate with that. Like, actually something, during my service year, I just recently finished my year with Episcopal Service Corps, and, like, one of the things I realized during that year is, like, oh, I like to read, and even if it's, like, not a book explicitly about God or whatever, I still feel like it feeds my soul, and, like, it also just, like, it fills that need to, like, learn, you know. Something I realized when I was in academia is that I just love learning. I'm such a fucking dork. So, yeah, I really love to read. I need to have, like, in the morning, I, like, need to have, like, well, some people have coffee. I don't drink coffee. I just need to, like, have some quiet time to read, and then I'm good. So.
Yeah, I think for me, it was such a more attainable way to engage with the divine and God, because I still to this day, I mean, even in my youth group, honestly, I did not use the Bible much unless I was talking about how common interpretations of frequently cited passages are factually incorrect. Because it's still, for me, a text that I am getting more comfortable with the language and the way that it has been weaponized. But when it comes to talking about, you know, more simple texts that are still complicated, I mean, even with Harry Potter, you still get into the complex thing of, like, well, you've got an author who is a horrible transphobe, and we don't want to be supporting transphobes. But how does that intersect with the fact that there is a generation of trans kids who grew up feeling like the kid in the closet, who had this magical realm of queer identity that they got to explore, or other interpretations? And it's a much safer way to engage those things, because if you're sitting there talking about what happens if we read Harry Potter as trans, and what can that teach us about, you know, relationships, it's a lot safer to practice those thought experiments when the person isn't a real person. It's a fictional character.
Yeah.
And so you can go through the practice of learning those skills of how do I want to stand up for myself? How do I want to stand up for others? How do I want to support people around me? And you can do it, I've found, more attainably with fictional texts because it opened up a world of what ifs for me. Whereas the Bible is a recollection of what happened, there's not that possibility of me being like, oh, this, what would have happened if this had happened? Because it's, at the end of the day, no matter how many ways you read the Bible, Jesus is still going to be crucified. And so I had the possibility of being able to read myself into instances where I could be like, what would I want to do in this situation, without the common knowledge of, well, if I was in that situation, I probably would have, followed the masses and done what was safest for me. I then get the safe opportunity of going through those thought experiments and practicing those things. And I think that the more we do those things with reading or with fictional characters or writing, the better we get at doing them in real life. If we find things like reading that we feel like God is teaching us how to love more, and we can learn how to love more and support each other, and how we can, safely engage in a conversation about, hey, the author of this particular text is not doing great and should have kept their mouth shut, without having that be a conversation that needs to explicitly include marginalized people who don't want to be included in it, versus actively attacking marginalized people, which some texts have had followings that have done, which I could see Harry Potter becoming a text that does that. I definitely think that people who like Harry Potter and follow J.K. Rowling will use that as an excuse, and I think that we will be seeing an interesting shift. And so I think it's just a interesting way to practice love and seeing the divine in different things. Growing up in Montana, I had a lot of people around me constantly talk about how they felt closer to God in nature, and it was just not something that resonated with me. I appreciate nature. I appreciate what God has created around me. I think mountains are really cool, but I never really felt like when I went off into the woods that I was climbing a mountain and getting higher to God. But I felt like when I read a text that had a passage, particularly passages I disagreed with, whether I disagreed with what the author was saying or what the main character was doing, and I could stop and be like, okay, well, what is the reasoning behind this? Why is it written this way? Why is this character doing this? It stretched my capacity to feel empathy, and that is what I want from my religious practices.
That's amazing. And I also think that, again, despite like J.K. Rowling being terrible aside, I think so. At least when I was younger, Harry Potter was like so demonized by the church too, because it was like it's a book, but it's a book about witchcraft and like
magic.
If you read it, you're going to hell.
Okay, I specifically remember like something talking about how apparently J.K. Rowling tried to argue that like Harry Potter is like a Christ figure, and so therefore it does have a Christian message. But then like my church was like, my youth group pastor was like, oh, but no, he's like not. So, I don't know, and it's just like interesting that like they say that, oh, this has magic and it's bad, but then it's like there are Christians that love the Chronicles of Narnia and the Lord of the Rings series because they're Christian magic things. I mean, like that lion is Jesus sort of thing.
Yeah, I really need to reread the Chronicles of Narnia as an adult because
I read it for the first time as an adult and I was like, dear God, that lion is Jesus.
Aslan!
Not even trying to hide it.
I just remember being a child and being in a fiction class that focused on like fantasy fiction. And so but it was a film class, and so we watched, oh gosh, I'm now gonna not remember the name on this podcast, and it's gonna bother me. the Golden Compass? Is that what
I've
with like
heard
the
about
polar
that.
bear?
That was like,
Yeah.
wait, no,
That
no,
was
no.
also.
okay, wait, Golden. Oh yeah, okay.
I just remember
like-
that was also controversial. Like when the
Yes.
movie
Yeah,
came
and
out, it was very
it was
controversial.
a Christian thing, right? Or am I totally off? Wait,
No,
there's
it was supposed to be a Christian thing, I'm pretty sure, but like it did not go over well. And I remember there being a girl in my class whose mom was like, "We will not let her watch the Golden Compass for this class."
Whoa.
And I just remember being like, "What?" So they like pulled her out of this class because they believed that she would not go well if she was exposed to the Golden Compass.
Oh my gosh.
And to this day, that baffles me, especially someone who does find reading and media so much a part of my experience of finding God. I would never personally be in a position where I would be so afraid of being exposed to the opposite line of thought.
Well, I guess, yeah, there is this fear that, like, I guess reading narratives like that or watching media like that will, like, encourage people to think for themselves, and, so it would seem thinking for
Heaven
ourselves...
forbid.
Thinking for ourselves seems to lead to, like, where we all are now, so...
Seems to lead to deconstruction and
Yeah.
healthier relationships to Christ.
Yeah.
oh no. And it's always so funny to me, like, because I remember when The Passion of the Christ first came out, all my friends were allowed to see it. And I was like 9 or 10 when that came out. So, like, a bunch of 9-year-olds and 10-year-olds and people younger that I knew were allowed to see this movie. And my parents wouldn't let me see it. But they did let me, like, watch other things. Like, my parents ended up letting me watch Harry Potter eventually and, like, other things that evangelicals didn't like. But it was so bizarre to me that, like, I had friends that weren't allowed to watch Scooby-Doo because it had monsters in it and a talking dog, but they were allowed to, like, go see Passion of the Christ as many times as they wanted to in theaters.
It's wild to me too,
And
because
I heard that was, like, incredibly violent, right? Like, it
Oh,
shows the
it's
It's
crucifixion.
incredibly
Okay.
violent, yeah.
super violent.
It's basically, like, it's basically torture porn that is excused because it's a religious movie.
Yeah, it's extremely violent. Yeah, it's wild to me too, because I grew up in a household where Harry Potter, which is probably why I'm fixating on it, came out when the first book came out when I was 1 year old, and my brother was 4, and my mom started reading them aloud to my brother. So I have been
Wow.
literally grown up with them. So they have been as much of an integral part of, like, we read that every night from when the books came out until the books stopped coming out, which was when I was in my preteens. And so I grew up in a household where I didn't want to watch Harry Potter because of the giant spiders, but my mom didn't care for religious reasons. But I grew up around a lot of people who couldn't watch it.
Yeah, a lot of people at my church weren't allowed, but then my parents were fine. I'm pretty sure I've watched most of the movies, but I didn't read the book series not because of obviously religious reasons. I got bored when I was reading the first book. I'm sorry.
Honestly, like, I reread it as an adult, and I was like, I'm glad that this text was a part of my growing up, but it's really not the best.
Instead of reading Harry Potter, I was reading another series that is apparently controversial for other reasons, the Warrior Cats books. So in Christian communities, it's controversial because it shows a, like, different version of the afterlife that is, like, not a Christian version of the afterlife.
I also read the Warrior books.
Yeah. Wait, Anna? Are you...
I've never heard of warrior cats?
Yeah, so it's like these cats that, like, live in these, like, clans in the woods, and they have, like, names, and they have their own sort of tribal systems.
They're like...
and they call humans two legs because they don't have the word for it. They just call us two legs because we walk on two legs. And then they call cars monsters because sometimes they run over cats. So, yeah.
Yeah, they were very popular in my elementary school. Like, people would play warrior cats.
I had,
at
like,
recess.
a cat sona.
Yeah, everyone had cats. Like, people, like, it was It was before we all had AO3 and the ability to write fan fiction, we were living our fan fiction. So we were all fanficting these cat lives. I never had a cat Sona, but I do remember playing Warrior Cats when I was in like 3rd and 4th grade.
That's so bizarre. I've never
And,
I think I've heard of the name, but
I forget what the name of like their afterlife is. Isn't it? Oh wait, isn't it like Star Clan? Like you know you have the Earth clans or whatever, and then you join the clan in the sky or some shit. I don't know. But I just remember like going to this one Girl Scout meeting once and talking about warrior cats, and this one person was like, "Our mom doesn't let us read those books because it like they don't have a hell. Like a hell doesn't exist. It's just like this." You know, so...
It's almost like a hell doesn't exist.
Oh! What?
I mean, definitely the evangelical version of hell doesn't exist. Like, it's not eternal conscious torment, and I don't think the Bible says that, so...
I know it's relatively recent theology that seems to be very exclusive to America, because we just love our doom and gloom.
And Dante.
Yeah, and Dante.
I remember that same instance of people being like, yes, it doesn't portray a hell. And at the time I was like, oh my gosh, like who could do that? And if anything, reading it, being like, yeah, there's no way this is. And now as an adult, I'm like, wow, it's amazing that I had the arrogance as a child to believe that I actually knew everything about the afterlife. Because there's no way I know anything.
Yeah.
I always remember being scared, like, on cartoons when they would go to cartoon hell and being, like, and freaking out, like, that's what hell's gonna be like, because it was, the pitchforks and the flames and everything.
On fire.
Yeah, and then, like, I think one time at my private school, they put on, like, a Tom and Jerry cartoon, and it ended with, like, Tom going to cat hell, where he's being tortured by dogs, and they turned it off immediately, because they were like, this is Satan, like, we shouldn't be watching this, and it was just, like... And that's why that's the reason why it scared me. Otherwise, it would have just been like, oh, okay. Like,
it's a cartoon.
That's what happened. Yeah.
It's fascinating to me how media can influence culture, which influences media, which influences culture. It's a cyclical thing. And especially within, like, popular culture, which for the most of our lives has been evangelical or at least some form of Christian majority encouraging media, where we can see things like we see now queer identity being more and more normalized, because the more that it is seen in media, the more it is normalized, the more that it is...
Okay, you bringing that up, I don't know if I guess I probably haven't shared the story on the podcast yet. At my 2015 summer church camp, someone, like, at this question and answer service at the summer camp asked the head pastor, what does the Bible say about homosexuality? And part of his response, he's like, oh, there's an attempt to normalize it in the culture, like in Hollywood and in media. Apparently there was this group of Hollywood executives that met together and they were like, how can we advance the LGBTQ agenda in TV and media? And from that came the TV show Glee. He just said this in front of, like, hundreds of children and adolescents, and I just...
Clearly, first of all, clearly he hadn't watched Degrassi before, because that came before Glee, and that was a messed up show. Because every kid went through everything on that show, but, like, I don't know, I feel like Glee, like, very much whitewashed the queer movement, like, maybe, maybe it made it more acceptable, quote unquote, but, like, it's a very whitewashed queer ideology.
Yeah, it was, like, important representation, I guess, but, like, yeah, definitely just toning everything down so that it's palatable to straight folks.
And that's why the L word was such a big deal when it came out.
Yeah.
I was talking to someone about the fact that they, now have the L word reboot, which, if anyone is interested in watching it, the second season is out. I have not watched the second season, so I cannot vouch for anything in the second season. But in the first season, there is someone who starts to have their queer come to Jesus moment. So I have hope in the second season that they will continue that path. We will see.
Okay. I have not seen Generation Q. I watched the original series
I watched a few episodes of the original series. I, like, need to watch more. I'm in the first season, so, yeah.
Honestly, I think you can just skip the original. Just go straight to Generation
Okay,
Q if we're being
Here's
real.
the thing. Here's the thing with the original. It's trash.
Yes,
It's
I love it.
Oh,
I love trash.
No, here's the thing. Let me finish. It's trash, but for a long time, it was the only trash we had. So it was you were grateful for that trash. Like,
It's a
that
staple.
show. Yeah, it's a staple. I know that for a lot of people, I saw it when I first came out, and I was just like, I learned so much watching it, but also I was just like, with our, at that time, I think it might have been 2017 sensibilities, I was just like, oh, this didn't age well at all. What happened to this character's bisexuality? What happened?
And
It
just
did not age
Jenny.
well, and-
No.
Jenny.
But they are doing a pretty, at least in season 1, they did a pretty good job of actually kind of addressing a couple of those things. And they do portray, they bring in some more people of color, they bring in people who are gender non-conforming, they go into a little bit about the fact that Shane is gender non-conforming.
Interesting.
And so they do address a couple of those things. Not as much as I would like. And I am absolutely certain in 5 years we're all going to be like, but for right now.
Can we please just have a whole episode that's just a big apology to Max? We need a Max apology episode. So April, I don't know if you're if you've seen any episodes with Max, but
I've only watched part of the first season so far. So.
Okay. If you continue to keep watching, just know that Max deserves so much better than what he receives, than the treatment he receives on that show. So my hope is that Generation Q addresses that too, where they're just like, oh shit, we were awful.
Yeah, they've addressed Jenny once explicitly. It's now been a year since I've seen the first season, so I need to rewatch it. But I'm watching the second season this weekend with my friend, so I will report. But yeah, it's interesting to see that type of thing. I'm very proud of them for portraying a queer pastor, and I'm interested to see how that goes in the second season. They did kind of end it on a note where there's a chance the queer pastor doesn't return, but I am very, very sure that that's not going to be the case, because I just have hope that they will continue to portray queer Christianity and queer faith, and show how difficult that intersection can be, especially as we reclaim it. I think that it's such a big topic for queer people right now that they would be fools to not continue to address it.
Absolutely. Because I know for a lot of people, their introduction into queer Christianity was, like, weirdly enough, Queer Eye. Like, over the last couple of seasons. Because you had the pastor episode, but then you also had Mama Tammy, whose son came out, and she's so apologetic for what she felt in the past towards that, and how she's basically devoting her life to not only, like, making her church better, but reconciling with her son, which I know for a lot of people, like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that, like, oh, queer people can also be Christians. And, like, that was the thing that introduced them to that concept on more of a mass media scale.
For sure. I mean, I know for me personally, even as someone who was a queer person of faith, I definitely did not label myself as a Christian until, like, maybe 2020.
Yeah.
Even going into queer Christian conference, QCF conference, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go see this cool thing. There's gonna be some cool panels. But I was definitely thinking I was gonna be more of an outsider than I actually was. Even though queer and Christian were in the title.
Yeah. I mean, I think I was surprised by how many people I really connected with there, especially given that it was a virtual conference. Like, I just really connected with the people so immediately.
I just think I will forever be proud of the virtual dance party, because I've had many.
Yes, that was fun.
And honestly, that was so much fun.
Yes! More of those. More virtual dance parties.
We'll have to have virtual dance parties once I'm in Ireland.
Yes, absolutely.
So sort of going back to what were you saying earlier about, like, the influence of like, you know, evangelical culture and sort of pop culture and them influencing each other. I'm curious as to whether you ever had like a cheesy T-shirt that like related to your faith. For example, wait, I'm just gonna go and get it. Silly rabbit, Jesus is for everyone.
That's amazing.
I just
Okay.
to the audience, to our listeners,
yeah.
I just showed a T-shirt that is bright green. It has the trick rabbit on it, and it says "Silly rabbit, Jesus is for everyone." 1 John 5:1a from coolfaith.com, which is now defunct.
Wait, what's
So
the
my
worst?
answer was yes, but now seeing that, my answer is no, because I have nothing that will compare to that ever.
I also remember, like, I got this at a Christian music festival, and, they had a bunch of different things like this, right? They had, like a Reese's, it looked like the Reese's font and everything, but it said Jesus, King of Kings.
I've seen that one.
And, like,
I've seen that, and I've seen, like, Mountain Dew where it says meant to die for you.
What the fuck? What the fuck?
I hate that. Nope.
So there was also one that looked like an Aeropostale shirt, except it said "I'm an apostle." And then I'll list one more example. Sorry for whoever doesn't really care about this, but there was a shirt with Nemo on it that said "I once was lost, but now I'm found."
That's
So
That's cute. I'll give him that one.
you know what? As long as we're talking about cheesy shit I got at a Christian music festival, I will show y'all the hat. Just 1 second.
the hat. Okay.
Okay.
It's like-
so before showing y'all this, I'm gonna have a little bit of some exposition here. So, I think this was a different Christian music festival than the one I got the T-shirt at. I mean, it was the same annual one, Awakening Fest. It was the big one in Northern Virginia up until 2014. I think they lost funding. But I was with my friend, and she was like, "Ooh, do you want to get these, like, airbrushed hat things?" Like, it's very early 2010s, these, like, hats that are bright white that you could have airbrushed. And so she was like, "Oh, what do you want to put on them? Let's have a matching hats." And I was like, Toby Mac had, like, just performed or something, or was going to perform, and so I was like, how about Jesus Freak? Oh, I guess this is showing it backwards to y'all, but this says Jesus Freak on it in big-ass capital letters. So...
And when was the last time you wore that hat in public?
Well, actually, a funny thing, in 2019, I dressed up as my evangelical self for Halloween, so...
That's amazing.
Yeah, I actually wore that shirt and the hat together, so...
Oh, that's incredible.
I mean, but, like, right, that definitely shows how, like... I mean, that's, like, a physical representation of how, like, particularly evangelical and particularly, like, non-denominational evangelical Christianity, you know, tries to, like, infuse itself with pop culture to remain relevant, and it just, like, kind of fails. I don't know.
Yeah, I know that I had some growing up, but the only one I could find when I was going through my stuff is I had, back in 2018 when Harry Potter and the Sacred Text was first doing their merch launch, their very first merch launch, they launched a shirt that said Harry Potter is my sacred text, and I had that one. And I know I have that one because I recently packed up my entire life in 2 boxes in order to move to Ireland, and it was in one of those boxes now.
Gotcha.
But I know that I have some, all of mine are up at my cabin, and I use them as cabin sleeve shirts. I don't know what they say, but it's really interesting to see. Because I think for me, being someone who studied communications, it's a manipulation tactic. Taking something that that is designed to make children love them. Tricks, bright, colorful, sweet, sugary cereal, Reese's, candy, these things that are designed for children to love them, and relating it to something that children might not have the capacity to have critical thought of. It's designed so that you create a bandwagon effect, which is not what we should be doing with our faith, in my opinion. I think we should be having more organic conversations, but it's definitely interesting to see marketing faith that way.
Yeah. It's just, you'd think you'd be more creative with it, because I feel like it's just it's like lazy parody, but no one's gonna get mad at them because it's a faith. It's kind of using faith to hide behind lazy creative ideas. where it's like this is not going to get people on board with your message. If anything, it's making people who are already on board with your message be like, oh yeah, like I'll get this thing. Like, you know, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's actually interesting. I used to work for Walt Disney World, and so I'm a big part of the Disney community. It's a pretty weirdly small and tight-knit community. And they just released their merchandise for their 50th anniversary, and everyone is like, what was your marketing team thinking? Because none of it is memorable, or it all looks like what they release every year. And I think it's really interesting to see, because I think that there, in general, is like a marketing issue with the marketers are people who grew up enjoying the thing, be it Disney or Christianity, and so for them it's sometimes almost hard to take their 60-year-old marketer self and put themselves in a 20-year-old deconstructionist's shoes. That's why we should all use Etsy.
Absolutely. I'm all for that. It's just so interesting because I feel like the older generation, I feel like this is also the case in a lot of other things, especially in politics, the older generation isn't letting go, and it's gonna like the younger generation's gonna be way older. Like I feel like millennials and even Gen X, to be quite honest, are gonna be way older when they get into places that boomers and stuff were at a much younger age. And that's why you see so many people, so many millennials and like Gen Z people leaving the church. Like it's very, because it's still being run by the same people that were helping run our own parents' churches. Like there isn't that evolution.
Well, and it's difficult too, because when I was thinking about whether or not I wanted to go to divinity school, I was like, well, I don't really want to be a pastor reverend in the sense of like, and I don't know I don't know if I have the capacity as one person to start a non-traditional church. And so I think it's interesting. I think what we're seeing is people who would make wonderful additions shy away simply because of the fact that there isn't room for upward movement of younger people. It's like, cool, you are in your 20s, you can be our youth pastor, but up until that, you gotta wait until the current pastor retires at 70 or dies at 80.
Yeah,
Exactly.
even in these like churches that are, you know, theologically progressive, like they have, you know, actually a lot of the churches that are theologically progressive in the United States, the mainline Protestant ones, have a lot of bureaucracy that does like keep youth from like, you know, and so it's like even though it's better for young people because of the theology, you know, compared to evangelical churches, like there's still so much bureaucracy and red tape you have to get through.
Yeah, it's interesting to see, because what we're seeing in our age is people are retiring later in every field. So then we end up with people who are in their 20s and 30s who feel infantized by the entirety of society because they're working entry-level jobs. They can't move up, or they're having to go to school for forever, which is what I have chosen to do. Mostly because I like school. Also because I didn't know what else I wanted to do with my life.
Yeah.
And then these people don't have a place where they can talk about the struggles that puts on their faith journey or on the way that they feel. It can feel really like you are further from God when you feel like you are 30 and you can't afford. So it's wild to think about the concept that providing for each other can be what helps provide us a direct path to God. It's a lot easier to think about God when you have your basic needs met. And also are in a fulfilling position. Like that too.
Yeah, your thought about going to school because you don't know what you want to do with your life, hard same. I mean, I am going to grad school next year. I deferred for a year, but I'm just kind of like, oh God, I hope I meet some folks in seminary that will like help me figure out what ministry I'm actually supposed to do. Because like you, I definitely don't feel called to like a pastor in like a traditional context, but I don't know, I'm figuring it out.
Yeah, and I think the thing that always is annoying for me is just when you have people who are of the older generation, like people who are boomers, and older Gen X, I'd say, who, again, it's that infantilization of like, oh, I did it this way. It's like, well, that was 40 years ago. It's like, if you really want a job, you need to go door to door. And it's like, that's not how
you fucking
anymore.
Yeah, no.
I've been at Starbucks before, and I feel like I just look like someone broken who needs to be fixed because people come up to me and tell me how to do things. And I'm like, you haven't had to look for a job since like the 60s. Please don't tell me how to do this.
Yeah.
No, for sure. I know for me, it was really difficult for my parents to understand why I wanted to go to a form of arts school. Because I was like, I'm either going to go get my divinity degree or I'm going to go study divinity through gender and ritual. And I know for my parents, they were like, okay, but why? And I was like, because if you want any decent job nowadays, you most likely have to have a graduate degree. And it's really hard for me to listen to people who didn't have similar life experiences, which is why a lot of the more attainable ways I've connected to my faith has been through things like smaller groups, like Kaleidoscope.
Mm-hmm.
But it's wild to think about what I always try to think about what the generation after us is going to do, because they, after being a youth group leader for this last year, I'm like, wow, they are so smart. They are so smart and so much more further progressive than I was at that age. And also I'm terrified for them.
Yeah, I mean, it gives me hope for the future that, you know, hopefully, like, the more folks who leave, like, churches that are, you know, that aren't welcoming and that have toxic theology, that, like, you know, we'll eventually start to build up churches that actually are healthy communities.
So, as we are reaching the end of the interview, one thing we like to ask our guests is, how can we best support your endeavors? Do you have anything that people can follow, that people can share, or do you have any charities that you would like to give a shout out to? This is your moment of self-promotion, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I recommend that everyone follow on Facebook and on Instagram, Transvisible Montana. They are a wonderful organization. They're the only trans-led organization in the state of Montana.
Wow.
Which is really cool to see. It's been a blessing to work with them. They have been very supportive of the fact that I am a queer person of faith, and so I highly, highly recommend following them. And then the other thing that I would like to plug is Kaleidoscope Missoula. So on Instagram, Kaleidoscope Missoula, they are another queer-run group. It is a group that has central non-hierarchical leadership, which is really awesome to see in a small group. It is queers only, so allies, we appreciate all of your financial support and love, but you are not welcome at our meetings. This is a space for just queer people, and they have awesome talks about God. So as for me, my social media is patron god Artemis. So play on my name being Artemis. It's my chosen name, and play on the fact that I am a person of faith and queerness. So I chose the patron god Artemis, and that's what I am on Instagram. I also think that's what I am on TikTok. I don't recommend everyone go follow my TikTok though. Although if you follow me on TikTok, I will follow you back and then send you all the TikToks.
Yes.
And I send each other lots of wholesome TikToks.
Yes. It's my new favorite love language.
Same! April, we'll have to send you the ghost one that I sent to Anna, because I am obsessed with it. I'm showing it to everyone.
Nice. Can't wait.
I will. But yeah.
Yeah, it was so nice to have you. I especially love that. I feel like we haven't really talked a lot about, I guess, books and media yet on the podcast, and so that was a great way to like have you on and talk about that. So thank you.
Yeah, we'll have to do maybe over like my winter break. I can come back and tell you what I've learned from my first semester of.
Yes, we would love to hear that so much, and we are so excited for you.
We're working on an outro song. This is just the placeholder. Yeah.
So, as you can maybe tell, we had some technical difficulties at the end of that. My computer was just going nuts. Like, it couldn't even load Facebook. I don't know what happened. But, so you caught me just on the end of what I was saying, and then all of a sudden they couldn't hear me. And apparently the computer couldn't either.
Yeah, and one thing I do actually want to bring up, because I've actually a couple people in my real life ask me this, is all of our episodes are filmed remotely. So April and I are located in 2 very different states, and every guest...
coasts.
Yes, and every guest we've had has been in a different area of the country, and in our friend Amy's case, she's in Hungary. So, blessings of the fact that there are mediums we can use to do high quality recordings. Yes.
It's called Clean Feed. It's pretty good.
Yes. So. It's awesome. And so we have that fortunately, but sometimes there are technical difficulties. It happens. So thank you for being so patient with us.
Yeah. So I guess let's get into our highs for the week. What's yours?
So I am actually going... so we're recording this part on Saturday, August 22nd, and the day this episode is released, my girlfriend and I will be at Disneyland. I haven't been since I was like maybe 19 years old, and for me it's a big deal because every time I've been to Disney, it's always been on someone else's dollar, either through generosity or through school, because for choir we'd go perform at Disney quite a bit. So I haven't been in years. And my girlfriend hasn't been in years either, and it's always been her dream to take a partner to Disney, and so we are gonna be there on Tuesday, so I'm very, very excited. Yeah!
Yay.
What's your high of the week?
Tomorrow I'm going to finally achieve my dream of being at church for like 6 hours in a day.
Yes!
Yeah, so I'm going to be on the worship team for the first time, and I'm also going to be giving sort of the welcome statement at the start of the service, which is super cool.
Oh!
And I'm going to be volunteering after the service with the crossover retreat, which is with 6th and 7th graders, and obviously, folks, I will be wearing a mask. We need to still wear masks. Coronavirus is still, but
yes.
I'm still glad that, at this point, like with masks and vaccines, it's relatively safe, at least in this area, to still gather, so.
Yeah. I know, same with LA. It's there's a lot more Delta variant now, sadly, but I'd say, like, in the spaces that I choose to occupy, everyone is vaccinated, or at the very least, people are respectful of those who legitimately can't get vaccinated, like children and immunocompromised people, so I feel very fortunate in that. But that being said, if you're able to get vaccinated, please do so and get your booster shot when it's available to you, because I truly believe as a Christian that getting a vaccine to protect other people from a virus is an act of love. So
and it does
please
have
do that.
The mark of the beast in it. We're going to get into this in our October episode.
Yes, it's not...
The vaccine is not the mark of the beast.
Yes, I'm a firm believer, like, God made doctors and scientists who not only have the brains to be able to develop vaccines and look out for how viruses develop, but also the compassion to be able to help other people. So it's not Jesus protecting you from the virus, it is God who has created humans who care about other people enough that they will risk everything to make vaccines available. So that is all the faith justification that I need, honestly. So please protect your siblings, get vaccinated if you're able.
Well, thank you so much for listening to this episode. Anna, do you want to go into how listeners can support us?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as we were saying earlier in the episode, please leave a review and rate us on Apple Podcasts because it does really help us in the algorithm. Likewise, we do have a Patreon, and if you're looking to financially support us, you can completely utilize that, and as more people sign up, we'll keep posting exclusive episodes as well as excerpts from April's memoir, and we also have some other fun surprises as well, depending on the tier you choose. Again, whatever you are able to donate, we are absolutely grateful for. And likewise, of course, you can follow us on all social media, Instagram, Twitter. We now have a Facebook page for those of you that still use Facebook.
Also, we're
Yes.
thinking about we're starting to think about like merch, so if you have any ideas about
Yes.
merch, please let us know, because we're thinking about it,
Yes.
we're excited about it.
Yes, we're toying with a couple of ideas, like cringy Christian merch and maybe some other things as well. So if you have something that you would like to wear or like to own, let us know, because we want to make that available to you.
We'll see you in the next episode.
Yeah, see you next time.